Welcome to TradeTheNBA.com. This is Jonas Reports for the 15th of September. Well, it continued just as expected. We had the spike, a little bit of softening from the white, but we were still getting a continuation of magenta below yellow and a continued drop in those, and that was enough to suspect that we were going to continue to edge lower. The short-term buyers from a steel standpoint has been enough to really keep it modest. While the number from a dip standpoint may seem significant relative to what we've seen from an increase, not really much of a threat. Comes easy right here between the 61 and 76%, 44.16 versus 44.63. Right around this 44.40 though gets us right back to the original part of the breakout at the end of August. So literally in just a couple of days you wiped out what all of August and the beginning of September did. No surprise with that. The question will be now is, do we get our turnaround? We're seeing red tilting up if it gets above blue right there. Could be close, 625 for blue, 569 here on the red readings. If white had continued straight up rising, probably would see a much more dramatic move. It still can pivot, so it's just a matter. But the shakeout ugly, dip below the red line for the first time in, well, quite some time, going all the way back into July. Last time we had the dip, but it immediately turned around. Here we've had 4 straight days of it. We'll see if this day finishes under there. We're at minus 62. It's possible that could turn around within that configuration, but still bearish overall. The fact that short-term buyers have kept a pretty decent lid on any decline is keeping things. And what we've been noticing is you get a pre-market bump that just gets sold off during the day, and that's consistent with distribution. Taking advantage of the higher price, you sell into the new buyers and take your gain, and that way you can get rid of a lot of extra volume in that. From an NQ standpoint, it had a little bit slower in crossing of the white setup there. You can already see flattening of the magenta. We had a much deeper dip of the red, all the way down to 109, and anytime you get down in those levels, you start to think about turnaround plays. So it'll be interesting to see, particularly since we're literally right on that Morganacci line. 15,401 is the 76%, and we're at 09 range. So that really gives a nice pivot. I think that makes it just a lot easier intraday when you're looking at it to go with the direction, and you can kind of gauge whether or not it's going to continue through based on those intraday readings going through there. Of course, the euro flatten this range until there's some sort of directional move. Yes, you get the news with consumer prices, things like that. That's why I plopped oil back on here from the ETF version of USO. As that rises, if we break out into new highs, that's definitely going to put inflationary pressures at the forefront, and that could be negative to the market. The Bitcoin trade, well, it took it from the 45,100 all the way to that 46,890. So it was pretty decent. It was clear on that turnaround reversal from where it is, and it's starting to get a little more volatile in the crypto space than it had been recently. From our 50K standpoint, we kept getting the white bounces expectation to the zero, and you can actually see I'm working that setup here. Every time we get a pivot of white over 30, we get the line, and then when green pops above, turns red. What I do find that even though when you get the red of the green popping above, it's just a matter of waiting for that confirmation sell that we would normally look for, which would be magenta below yellow and magenta both below that cyan 33 level right here, and it corresponds to usually the sell, and it did exactly that. It went right down to the zero Morganacci line and fit that beautifully. And working that also into the intraday setup here within, this is the new Opus. I haven't looked recently, but from its performance standpoint, that's kind of what that looks like. Still making adjustments with it. When I look at it, we're getting closer to what Paint Bar should represent, where orange candle comes in, we have the buy, the sell signal turns in. It ignored the little peak move because it did recognize the white configuration going through there, and that will be helpful when it's looking for these broader moves. It won't be hard to adjust the Paint Bar to match those setups, but it really started off nicely. If we go back to pre-market, we had the big bounce, rolled over pretty cleanly, and that was just straight down to that setup. Tempted little pop, but again, here's one of those where you get the signal, but just like literally a bar later or whatever, we get the spike of the white. So I'm working on it to set up that stop that would just say, hey, take break even, slightly loss, instead of holding on to a position you already know is going to go to the 0% anyway. And then what I did was I included two different versions of stop. One, a stop loss from a dollar per contract standpoint, and a secondary one of just number of points. And it's really clean when you look at that. Actually, I can show you briefly here. You go to the edit strategies and customize, and you can see, so well, beyond just being able to turn on the trades, you just pick the individual stop and how many points relative to what risk level comfort is, and that makes it a little easier than following some of the ATR ones that generate arbitrary numbers. Though I like the ATR setup simply because it reflects the volatility at the current time. That's not always a capable function when you're trying to manage an account and you want to limit your risk to a certain percentage, and that keeps it. What the idea is with some of these is avoiding a lot of these muck areas where we're, when you're below the 23% and or getting the spike of white, there really isn't a whole lot of bonus for that. It does give you an idea to be able to stay with a short that has a little bit of a bounce, but going back through checking, at least from a 5K standpoint, you don't get that many breakdowns of significant lows. Those usually come from your peak moves, so interesting worth noting. As always, though, I will keep updating you with relevant stuff, and I'll probably send out the update for this new Opus, just so that you have it with all of those configurations pre-done, so that you'll be able to see exactly how it goes. But starting to look good, and as soon as I have a couple of issues with some of the GAM exits and that should refine things, and I don't see why this won't go well over a 50% win rate setup. The profit factor already there. I mean, from the 50K standpoint, the profit factor was, we're not even close with the adjustments that I need to make, and I think it was still over 2. Yeah, and almost on 2 on the short. So looking for that and improving win percent rate. I know previously I had it at 56% simply because of just a matter of making a series of adjustments with stops and that, and making it relative to the signals. And that's, to me, more important, because you're never going to be able to guarantee that you're going to have the same degree of up moves or down moves for that matter. And so you want it to be consistent to the readings rather than just strictly trying to eke out the biggest dollar, return on that. So, as always, I will update you as necessary. Trade well.